Everybody's got them. You know, that great idea on how you can make more money, maybe, or maybe you're doing the right thing by taking your money out of the stock market or investing into some speculative thing, or maybe keeping up with the Jonases and buying that luxury item that you've always wanted because you deserve it. We all have them. They're called financial regrets. And so today I'm going to discuss some of the financial decisions that my husband and I wish we could take back, and also some of the things that we wish we didn't spend money on. But then also talk about the things that we're really glad to invest in, whether that's really for our retirement or even just things in the day to day. Because here's the thing, fire really isn't about never spending any money. That's not what it's all about. It really is having intentional decisions on what you do with your money. So let's go. One of the biggest regrets that I have is not starting a Roth IRA sooner. Having a Roth IRA, in hindsight, really is a game changer, especially if you think that you're going to have a higher tax bracket later on in life. For us, it's likely that we will have a lower tax bracket, but the idea of not ever having to pay taxes again out of your investment is really very appealing. The second financial regret that I have is not dabbling in the stock market earlier and opening a brokerage account earlier. True, when I was younger, the entry for stock market accounts or brokerage accounts was really very difficult. I do remember having a coworker who worked at Morgan Stanley previously, and I was asking, well, what does it take to open a brokerage account? And I was told, well, you have to have $250,000, which was impossible for me at the time, making minimum wage. And so I've always assumed that that was the case. I did not know that in the last maybe decade that all these companies have popped up, and opening a brokerage account now is really as simple as just putting in as little as $50, and you can even buy fractional shares or really any kind of investment in there. And the choices for investments were vast. I wish I had bought into some of the more speculative ones like Bitcoin, even though there is high risk there. But nobody can predict the market. But they always say hindsight is 2020. So maybe taking chances is something that I should have done. Another regret that I have is pausing contributions or dropping our contribution rate to 6% when I got nervous about the market. I really am glad that my husband talked me out of that and urged me to continue to contribute 10%. Looking back now, really, I did not understand the phrase time in the market beats timing the market. And that is so true. There is power in what they call dollar cost averaging. And the idea is to invest the same amount of money every month so that you can weather the ups and downs of the stock market. The fourth regret that I have, and I'm not really sure that this would have been possible in our situation, was withdrawing some of our Roth and 401k money. Like I said, a lot of people, I think, have good intention, but life will throw you a curveball. And even with the best of intentions, sometimes things just don't happen. And I know that was true with my husband and I. At that time, we didn't have the discipline to start it all up again. Another regret I have is maybe not educating myself enough about the different types of funds that are out there to invest in. For example, I had not known about ETFs until maybe in the last 2 years. All these years, I only assumed that the funds that were available to invest in were what was offered in my employer's 401k account. But then as I started reading, apparently ETFs are out there which echo the same type of funds that I had in my employer's account. The only difference is that some of them actually have a lot lower fees, And apparently, I also later found out that the tax implications of ETFs and mutual funds are also different. Performance wise, some of them are comparable, but it would seem over the last decade at least that ETFs have really exploded in their growth. And so I wish I had known about that a lot sooner. One of the biggest regrets I have is not understanding the power of the compounding of time. If I had known time was really the biggest compounding factor for retirement, I definitely would have opened other accounts a lot sooner. For example, a brokerage account or a Roth IRA account. That's time you will never get back. My final regret is spending money on things that really did not give us contentment and satisfaction and joy. Marie Kondo is an organization guru, and one of the things that she teaches is do not keep anything that doesn't give you joy. There have been a lot of purchases over our lifetime, my husband and I, and over the course of our marriage that we've purchased for fleeting hobbies and spent money on that we don't even do anymore. For example, there was a time I believe we did fencing, and that was a fleeting interest, and we don't do that anymore. None of that stuff that we bought for those things are here with us anymore. And so I think part of the lesson that we learned there was to ask ourselves instead of diving in too quickly, really understand, is this something that we really want to invest money in and will keep our interest for the next foreseeable future? I think it's all too easy with human nature to just give in to a desire and buy something because that's what you want. The wisdom around waiting on purchases, I think, is really sound. And so in the last few years, we've really been a lot more intentional when we make purchases, especially big ticket items. We really think about it, shop for the best deal, and then ask ourselves honestly if this is something that we really want and willing to invest in. And so not only has that had a positive effect on our pocketbook, but it also helps with not accumulating things, which you have to declutter later on. Okay, enough beating myself up. Because here's the thing, not everything that we spend money on or financial decisions that we made that were wrong was a mistake. I do believe that every single one of them was a lesson for us on what not to do. And therefore, for that alone, it does have some value. On the other side of these regrets, there are things that I don't regret spending money on. For example, the first one and the most important one to us is tithing, giving to God first. Even though sometimes when you look at the numbers, it is a big amount, 10% of your income. However, the Bible tells us to be faithful and to be cheerful givers. And everything that we have is given by God. And the 10% is really such a small amount to further his kingdom and to further his ministries here on earth. And so God really just wants your heart and your obedience to this. He doesn't need your money. The second biggest thing that I really don't regret spending money on is travel because I feel experiences are worth their weight in gold, especially for my children. And we're also not promised tomorrow. And so being able to go do things and see things and understand other cultures and other places is more educational than anything that you can learn in school. Another thing that we don't mind spending money on is hobbies, especially hobbies that not only enrich your life, but actually teach you a skill. For example, I recently invested in some language lessons so that I can learn another language. And another hobby that we all love and spend time and money on are learning musical instruments. So my daughter and myself, we love music. And so that's something that I also encourage with our kids. So my son and my daughter both played musical instruments in school. And that is something that I don't regret spending any money on. And as soon as my daughter was born, we started a 529 for her. These are things we don't regret spending money on because funding their education, especially for college, is really big. I want to be able to give them the gift that my parents gave me when they paid for my college. The fifth item that my husband and I don't regret spending money on is what I would call friction reducers. These are quality of life things that just make our lives easier and more convenient. For example, I know this sounds frivolous, but I do really enjoy the ability to just order things from our grocery and then being able to pick it up on my way home. That to me is priceless. For some of our groceries here, it's a free cost, but for some it's $5, and I feel like that $5 is worth it. On other days when I'm really exhausted and have had a long work day, I sometimes will indulge in free grocery delivery. And that to me is also worth it because driving around, walking from aisle to aisle, it usually takes me 2 hours or so to buy groceries and then bring them back here at home. So the time that you take to drive the grocery, walking out down the aisles, checking out, all of that I feel is worth it to pay for the yearly fee for grocery delivery. The next item that we don't regret spending money on, I'll call time savers. So these are things that maybe automate tasks for us, or these are things that maybe we might outsource to people. For example, my husband and I are not handy people. And there is a level of work that's required when you have a house, such as maintaining your backyard and weeding and all of that. Anyone who has a lawn will understand what I'm talking about. Finally, a few years ago, we decided to hardscape the backyard. And my husband and I are not handy, so we willingly paid somebody to do the hardscaping for us. And you know what? Even though it was very expensive, the money was well worth it because all the summers from here on out that we're not weeding and we won't be doing any mowing of the lawn is well worth the price of that hardscaping, I will tell you. Finally, the last thing that we're more than willing to spend money on are tools for healthier living. So some of these include a recent purchase for weights so that we can do some weight training and gain some bone strength. And also, years ago, my husband bought me a rowing machine, and that really has been such a blessing to have so that we don't have to go to the gym and do that exercise. And also, buying organic produce and vegetables is another thing that I don't mind spending money on. I feel better about buying food for my family that doesn't have any antibiotics or chemicals or pesticides or anything like that. And I do think there is some level of environmental benefit that comes with organic food. So, what's the difference between no regret spending and regrettable spending? For me, I do think money spent trying to impress other people, things that depreciate immediately on stuff I don't really need or end up using, those are just waste. And those are definitely regretful items. I don't regret spending money on my family, on experiences that create memories that will last a lifetime, on investments in myself, especially in my health, that hopefully will pay dividends in the future when I get older. Nowadays, when we make any sort of purchase, we always ask ourselves, is this going to matter in 5 years? Am I buying this to impress another person? Will I even remember that I made this purchase? Is this for me or am I trying to impress someone else? Fire does not mean you have to be miserable and miserly about money. It does mean you have to be intentional, spending on what truly matters to you and cutting out the things that don't. So, we all have financial regrets, and I shared mine with you today. The key is learning from them and making better choices going forward. So, here's my question for you. What's your biggest financial regret? And on the flip side, I'd love to hear what you spend money on that was totally worth it without regrets. Drop it in the comments. I would love to hear your stories. Until next time, I'll see you. Thank you.